Hi, everybody. Welcome to the end of the first day of the 2020 Words and Music Writers Conference. I'm Tad Bartlett. I'm the managing editor of the Peauxdunque Review. We are proud partners with One Book, One New Orleans in putting on some of the programming for the Words and Music Conference, and something that's very dear to our heart and which you will have a chance to see a panel on tomorrow afternoon, administering the Words and Music Writing Competition. And as part of that partnership, Words and Music and One Book, One New Orleans have been very happy and willing to allow us, the Peauxdunque Review, to put on this event at the end of the first night. We did this last year, celebrating at that point the end of our first year of publication of the review, where we brought on readers from issues 1 and issues 2. We had this grand event at this Mexican restaurant in Mezcaleria called Espiritu. If you're ever in New Orleans, please look up Espiritu and go eat there and drink there. It's very wonderful. But we were terribly nervous pulling all of that together. We're going to have the readers there. We're going to have the food. Are people going to show up? Are they going to enjoy it? And indeed, people showed up and they enjoyed it. And I think really everything from that point on has been just an unexpected and wonderful success for the Peauxdunque Review. And we just enjoy being this outlet for all the various intersections of writing communities, not just in New Orleans and not just in the region in the Southeast, but really nationwide. I had hoped that our editor-in-chief, Larry Wormington, could be here with us tonight. He is battling, to put it mildly, severe internet connectivity issues on a remote island in Canada right now. So it is just me, but this would not exist without his crazy vision. This being the Peauxdunque Review, which if you've not seen them, this was our inaugural edition last year, these beautiful hardcover print reviews. And I just thought it was crazy when he said, not when he said he wanted to do a journal. I mean, Peauxdunque Writers Alliance had been around for 11 years when he approached us with that idea. And we thought, well, that makes sense. That's like the next logical step. But then he wanted it to be print in this world. And I'm like, well, and he was insistent. So we agreed with that and went forward with it and thought it was crazy. And then he wanted to do hardcover for the first issue and then for the second issue. And for the third issue, and the fourth issue coming out also will be in that. And again, you think it's crazy, but then you see, the contributors who end up in it hold it in their hands and see it and value where their work is. And I think even more importantly, we see readers hold it in their hand and page through it, and you realize what a necessary thing this can be, particularly in the world we live in today. So tonight, a year after that first event, we are here to celebrate year 2 of the Peauxdunque Review with readings from some of the authors in issues 3 and 4. Issue 3 came out in July. Issue 4 is going to come out in a couple weeks here, probably at the beginning of December. Not probably, it will. So those are my authors who are waiting in the waiting room. And you heard me say probably. I didn't mean anything by that. It's coming out in just a couple weeks. Here's issue 3, which is this beautiful cover. So far, all of our issues have been by the same artist. They're all different birds. You see behind me the painting that was issue 2. Real quick, I'm going to share screen the painting that's going to be the cover for issue 4. I just want y'all to see this beautiful thing. There it is. This is a heron from Louisiana, and this is going to be the cover for issue 4. Again, all by the same artist, Ramon Carrasco. So I don't want to get too far down my rambling. I promised people that I wouldn't, and yet I have. We're going to have our first reader is Freesia McKee. She is published in issue 3 of the Peauxdunque Review, and I hope you enjoy what she's got to read, because we certainly enjoyed it, and we're very honored to publish it. So take it away.
Hi, everybody. I'm Freesia McKee, and I'm so happy to be here calling in from Fort Wayne, Indiana, of all places. And thank you, Tad, the whole staff, and especially Nordette on these two poems, really like taking the shoelaces of the poem and pulling them so that the poems got as tight as they could be. I really appreciate that, the editorial attention. Here's the first poem, Westward. A few hours into our 3,000-mile road trip, my dad and I will stop for dinner at a roadside stand. Before us, the back of a semi-truck glittering. The semi's end will read simply, "The End." It will get less hilly the farther west we go from Utica, where my great-great-grandmother put supper on the table every night before our family made their way across the continent. Near the end, we will finish roasted potatoes from home. My dad will eat peas from a can. Each with a different set of memories, will ask what the other person remembers. Strange litanies of unmatched recollection. My dad and I will share a bag of almonds, listen to the radio, and talk about border walls. He believes in a partial wall. I don't believe in borders. And neither of us knows what it feels like to be imprisoned, looking for a safe place for family. How would it resonate in the chest and belly to be forcibly separated from your daughters? We don't know much about the Utica grandmother, couldn't speculate what would have happened if she had been detained. For a while, the end will be a joke, but the next day my dad will quote a Bible verse, ask why I believe borders are fraudulent. What would you do, he would say, if a stranger broke into your house as we drive across Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin? His voice will catch in anger at the edges as he thinks of what he'll say next, not listening to me speak, even though he didn't raise us that way, until I don't say a thing. I just hold the shared bag of food up between us so he can grab another handful. Across the country, we are welcomed where we do not belong. We will recreate the way our family moved, whose borders we are following. Whose borders are we following? So I'm going to read the other poem that the Peauxdunque Review published, and then I'm going to read another piece, and then I'll be at my 10 minutes. So this poem is after Kaveh Akbar, and if you haven't had a chance to look at the Peauxdunque Review, they do such a beautiful job of pairing poems with photographs. It's just really a gorgeous thing to be a part of. So this is Daughters I Once Was. Daughter crying on the curb in the grocery store parking lot, daughter climbing the low splitting apple tree, unwedded daughter, red wagon daughter pulled like saltwater taffy, daughter reticent to swim cold, drunk daughter, daughter who finished the book and stole the magazine, oldest daughter, daughter of a daughter, broke daughter, moneyed, unemployed daughter, daughter who thought about picking up the check, daughter clearing plates after brunch, daughter who didn't know what sacrifice meant, graduated daughter, daughter spinning stairs, snot-nosed daughter, daughter who didn't call back, daughter lost in Queens, daughter lost in downtown Chicago, daughter lost in Oakland at midnight with 1% battery on her cell phone, daughter of the forgotten birthday, 1,600-mile daughter, daughter of allergies and Euclid Street, fish hook in the creek, daughter, daughter with the bad back, daughter inherited, ankle bracelet daughter, daughter who would have thunk, mountain bike daughter, daughter with a secret, drawn daughter, daughter sifting sand, daughter who stayed a daughter, daughter lifted aloft easily, daughter who wasn't always easy. Okay, so I'm going to read a little section of a longer, like 12-page poem. And I wondered if it was out of turn for me to read something that was related to New Orleans and a New Orleans-based event, but I just am thinking so much about all of our connections, especially during this time of social distancing. So just humbly offer this poem. So it does talk about the ghost ship fire, and it talks about Hurricane Katrina, just as a content warning. On television, Anthony Bourdain would frequently end up in boats on his way to catch fresh fish, his salt and pepper hair blowing above the bow. In our house, we eat hummus, oranges, crackers made with flax. We eat kale, chocolate, tofu. We go out and order French fries. I think Bourdain would have disapproved of our scant meat intake, though I already do plenty that is bad for my health. Approaching 30, much of my interior still feels like mystery. What's the best way to stay healthy? Live a long life. Bourdain was the hero we wanted, imperfect, the one who would pull the millennial monster from the depths, bringing it to light. I do not know a lot about the hero's journey. Lost my interest in high school talking about man versus self, man versus man, man versus God. So many of us left out of the story. The way we talk about storytelling says as much about the teller as our stories. The 2016 ghost ship warehouse fire in Oakland, California ended the lives of 36 people. Ghost ship was a place you could live and make art without paying much money. But in exchange, you forfeited your safety. The city of Oakland had received complaints about ghost ships since '98, massive piles of art materials in and around the building, hazards from the start. No red exit signs, no fire escape. In the months afterward, so many of us, millennial and otherwise, talked with each other about living, performing, creating art in similarly unsafe spaces. I remember reading the account of one tenant who said that after he moved into Ghost Ship, he was so scared he bought his own fire extinguisher and slept with it next to his head every night, a millennial teddy bear. The Ghost Ship existed for at least 10 years before the Great Recession. Perhaps Bay Area rent prices were simply a harbinger of what was to come. A ghost ship is a drifting boat with no humans aboard. Ghost ships may be mythical or real. As a teenager, I boarded a train to New Orleans with my church youth group where we'd signed up for hurricane relief efforts post-Katrina. We were Midwestern teenagers, mostly white. It had been 2 years since the storm, and we were assigned to gut a house in the lower ninth that had apparently not been touched for 2 years. In the aftermath of the levees breaking, another government-made disaster, someone visited each house and on the outside spray-painted an X code. Who of us has the luxury of forgetting this? The job. Enter the house, empty dresser drawers and kitchen cabinets. Throw everything into the dumpster outside. Christmas ornaments, hand towels, children's books. Everything in the house laid as it had been before the storm, now sopping because of holes in the roof, moldy, dishes in the sink, clothes in the washer for 2 years. No captains, no mates, no crew. At night, we returned to a church and cooked each other dinner. We never even learned the names of the family who had lived in the house that had filled with water and monstrous mold. At the end of the week, we left and returned to Wisconsin. What does your character want? Where do we start with the obstacles? All memories a part of our personal maps, cartography, a ghost ship, a stolen house, a harbinger. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Freesia. You know, the one thing I do miss about being in that live space, and this is a wonderful virtual space that Words and Music has created, is hearing that the audience respond, because I know they would be that they are responding wherever they're sitting. Just wonderful work. And you know, it's really gratifying to go from reading a piece, have it pop up in the submission queue, and I particularly remember that with the daughter's poem, as I was reading it that very first time, that like the intake of breath, you know, like, oh man, and to feel that at every stage of production, and then hearing you read it, had the same feeling. So this is really a gratifying experience. So thank you. So the second reader we have up tonight, Alex Jennings. He has fiction in issue 3. He also had fiction in issue 1. Was it 1 or 2, Alex?
It was 1.
It was 1. And man, I don't know. I think maybe every time you send me a story, I'm going to want to publish it. But this one, All His Teeth, was just exploded my brain. I mean, it did things in a story about New Orleans that I realized as I was reading it that every story about New Orleans has failed because it didn't do the things that you were able to do. So anyway, without anything further from me, I want to hear from you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. You know, I turned over in my mind a lot exactly what part of the story to read. And I think like the first several pages is probably the best way to go. And then I'll have a little bit of something to say after that. What you want us to do with them? Treese asked. Talent Ravel glared at the corpse slumped in the wooden chair. Just then, the shack shook in a high wind. The heavy breeze seemed lost, as if after shearing around the buildings in the central business district, it had hit the Mississippi and skated upstream. When the river turned, the wind kept on straight, tumbling ashore and shaking the shack on its stilts. Put him in his car and roll it into the lake, Talent said. His voice was flat and his words were clipped. His speech snapped even like hospital corners. He had worked hard to get it that way. You want us to burn him first? Talent sighed. Is that what I asked you to do? I don't... What? Did I say to burn the body first? Nah, you said... Talent looked sideways at his lieutenant. Patrice Mims was lightly built, lean with a sharp nose and cheeks that made him look carved from African wood. Talent sometimes wondered whether his mother insisted he keep Treese close because Treese was so easy to look at. Do you think I forgot to include that crucial bit of instruction? Nah, you would have remembered. So how about you put the body in his car and roll it into Lake Pontchartrain for me, Talent said. Can you do that? Well, Talent simply turned away and left Treese standing alone before the tied-down corpse. He stepped into the bathroom and washed his hands. He did not look at his reflection. Instead, he examined his fingers and palms, the knobby, scarred knuckles. He wondered what a fortune teller would make of his left palm, of the scar slashing diagonally down its middle. Had that injury altered his fate? Talent's cell phone buzzed in the front left pocket of his gabardine slacks. He finished drying his hands and answered it. Hello? It's Mama. I know, caller ID. Come see me, boy. It was Thursday, which meant pizza for lunch. Talent Baptistone was already thinking ahead, hoping he could get one of the slightly burnt squares with the brown but not blackened cheese at the edges. The classroom smelled of chalk dust, milk, and faintly of mold. First grade self-portraits hung on the wall to Talent's right, brightly colored and wobbly. Talent sat crisscross on the rainbowed carpet before the central chalkboard, huddled as if for warmth. Mrs. March stood in front, leading the class in a recitation of the alphabet song, complete with silly examples for each letter. "Okay," Ms. March called brightly. "Line leader, please line up." Talent uncoiled like a spring and bounded to the classroom door. He had waited weeks to be named line leader in his first grade class, enduring stints as board eraser, light switcher, and caboose. This was his time to shine. He'd even practiced watching soldiers line up and march on TV. His uncle Wilmer had explained to him that soldiers gathered into columns, which were multiple lines compounded, but the rationale was basically the same. Thinking of his uncle made Talent's head hurt, so he stopped. With his title bestowed by the teacher herself, no one could question Talent's position. They lined up with quiet fingers and voices off and headed for the bathrooms before going out to recess. In the bathroom, Talent policed his classmates, making sure to stop any trouble before it could start. Last week, August Dolan had slipped into the girls' bathroom instead of the boys' room, and the entire class had lost their recess to a lecture about following directions and being first-time listeners. Thinking back to the last week felt strange for Talent. It was as if he looked in on another life. He knew something terrible had happened since then, something irreversible. But if he was good enough, if he set an example to the other kids who were still waiting for their birthdays and hadn't yet turned 6, maybe nothing like that ever had to happen again. Talent's late model Nissan Altima was beginning to get on his nerves. It sat so low to the ground that getting in it made him feel like he was halfway lying down. When he first got the car, he had loved that feeling. It felt luxurious but not ostentatious. Talent didn't believe in luxury, almost hated it. The worst thing he could imagine was that anyone could see him coming. He liked to present himself as an average man living within his means. From I-90, he took the Claiborne exit and descended into Central City. He crossed MLK and turned up Felicity, arrowing slowly through the neighborhood. Before long, he arrived on Josephine Street and parked outside a green, blue, and white double. His knuckles throbbed as he locked the car. There had been a time when he could have left it unlocked, idling, with the key in the ignition, and the Altima would have sat untouched, running until its gas was gone. That was before the indictments, though. These days, everyone in the neighborhood knew Talent, knew his car, but more and more kids were drifting in from Holly Grove, from the Treme, not thugs, not gangsters of the old school, but kids who had seen one too many hip-hop videos and thought they were hard. Their behavior was at best difficult to predict, and at worst reckless in the extreme. Talent didn't mind visiting his wrath on anyone who crossed him or the family, but he wasn't interested in hurting kids. Juanita Duplass, Mama, had been a singer in her day. Her girl group, the Euphonics, had cut a few minor hits in the late 60s, and life in the music business had brought her within the reach of Alfonso Ravel. She had left the group, married Alfonso, and had taken an active hand in the business. After Fonzo had his first stroke, she ran the business herself while he was incapacitated. The changes she made helped things run a little smoother with the Jews and the Italians. With profits up, nobody had a reason to challenge her rule. Well, nobody but Talent's Uncle Wilmer. With Wilmer gone, Mama had adopted Talent as her own. Talent had never asked her why or what she had seen in him. He knew. Mama dusted the living room while Talent sat and watched. Years ago, he had tried to get someone in to clean the place for her, but Mama was too territorial. She didn't want anyone else in her kitchen cooking, and she didn't want anyone messing with her things. The young Dominican girl Talent had hired lasted all of 3 days. Talent had had to pay her for a full month and explain to her that her violent-ass ex-boyfriend and not sweet old Mama had broken her eye socket. "What's bothering you?" Talent asked as Mama lingered over a photograph of Fonzo. "Trang wants to open a restaurant on O.C. Haley," she said flatly. Talent grunted. "This isn't that sort of neighborhood. She should head to the West Bank if she wants a new space." "That's the word I sent. She wants to have a sit-down and iron it out." Thong Trang was a bird-boned gangster queen who ruled much of New Orleans East through a mixture of fear and razor-sharp business acumen. She didn't exist on paper, but she owned restaurants, bingo parlors, and an army of dead-eyed soldier boys willing to do anything she ordered. The Vietnamese are disciplined, Talent said. Mrs. Trang knows how to keep things running smooth. What you saying? That letting them in for the time being might be a good idea, he said. When we're stronger, we might be able to push them back out. We might could, Mama allowed. Maybe. They know we're weak since the arrests. If they want to set up shop bad enough, there's little we can do about it. We ain't dead yet, Mama said. We more than a business. What else are we? We proof there's more to Central City than little niggas playing cowboys and Indians. Trying testing too hard. The way things like this work is somebody go to you, and then you come to me. Trang thinks she can go straight to the top. Now, when we meet, I got to find a reason to cut up rough, and you going to back me. It could get ugly. Goes without saying, Talent nodded briskly. But that's just regular business. Vaughn in town. Talent rocked back in his chair. No one had seen or heard from his brother in years. Lamar seen him in the quarter with the woman, followed him. He's staying at the Monteleone. Why, what? Bring him to me. Talent swallowed. Yes, he said, right away. Mama shook her head. Not a scratch. Talent bit his lip, nodded. Soon as I can. And so I'll leave that there. How am I doing for time? I just wanted to say a little word about this.
You get time for a word.
Okay. So I've lived in Central City for, I think, about 12 years now, almost exactly come Thanksgiving. And this story is what came about from watching the neighborhood change over time. When I first moved in here, the Hankton gang ran everything. And then I think in 2011, upwards of 80 of them were arrested in like one fell swoop, and the back of the gang was broken. And so after that, for a good couple of years, Central City became much more dangerous because criminals tend to prefer routine, and they're not really interested in hurting anybody if there's no percentage in it. So with them gone, the power vacuum made things pretty dicey, and some of the violence crept onto my actual block, which was very unusual. So in thinking about that change and what that would have meant to the gang and to the workings of the neighborhood, I came up with the idea for this story, and I'm happy with it. I hope you guys enjoyed it.
Well, we were obviously we were very happy with it too, Alex, when we read it, when it came in. And what's amazing, hearing you talk about the genesis for the story, I remember well the news articles about the Hankton gang and the arrests, but just as somebody reading the news, you don't think about the human stories contained within the news. And this story does such a great job at exploring the humanity of the actors, and they're actors in a play in the newspaper, but your story takes them into this fully fledged humanity that was really wonderful to read. And that gives me an opportunity to real quick plug Tubby and Coos, who is the bookstore for the conference. You can buy issues of the Peauxdunque Review. You can read the rest of Alex's story, which is in issue 3 through them. And I hope you do, so that you can read the rest of it, as well as all the wonderful work. We're only going to get a very small sampling, really, of just the beautiful work that people send to us and that we're privileged to publish. So thanks, Alex. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Sure. Next up tonight, we have a writer who I have followed for almost 10 years now, that I've known David Meischen, just through the intersection of different writing communities, which I think a good journal, that's what we are. We're a crossroads between these different writing communities. And David is a fiction writer and a poet of just immense talent and beauty and precision. In issue 2, we actually published one of his short stories and one of his poems. And as managing editor, I see more work come in from somebody, and this happened with Alex too. You know, somebody who I've grown to really like their work, and I don't want to taint that process. I'm the traffic manager, right? So I send the stories out and assign them to our readers. We've got this wonderful large staff of readers from the Peauxdunque Writers Alliance, and then, you know, sometimes I'm crossing my fingers. I'm hoping that one makes it through the preliminary reading, and sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes it does. And of course, David's has now twice, because he has a set of poems coming out in issue 4, which he's going to be reading from today. And I know y'all are going to enjoy hearing what David does. David, take it away.
Thank you. I love Peauxdunque Review. And I love these intersections of writing communities, and I appreciate the poems you've taken. I'm going to read 3 poems from issue that are going to be in issue 4. Each one is about a piece of art. And then if I have time, a 4th one also about art. The first one is called Fixed Horizon. The epigraph says May 19th, 2018, and you will recognize a famous piece of art here. Rain this afternoon. Up 8th Avenue and across West 53rd, we dance our part in crowd scene with umbrellas. Sidestep, jostle, sidestep. Like the rain, the light we breathe is soaked and gray, spun and spattering, sibilant. A city of tires skimming the rain slick. My trousers soaked from knee to cuff, rain coming into the building with me, riding the escalator up, my steps heavy and damp, to an L in the corridor, where I turn, and there she is, lone woman, recumbent. A meadow dry as hay, the mowed field beyond, on the horizon, a house, a barn, no sun. 5 decades dissolved to the first time I saw her, struck still as a block of salt by an 8x12 print. What is it about wonder? What is it about Christina's world? At 19, I didn't know the woman's story, didn't know she couldn't walk, but I could see. In every line of Christina's body, she wants what we all want, that we can't name, that every moment of our breathing is just beyond reach. I see a woman who can walk, a woman still young. She steps from the farmhouse that has been her only home. She crosses the mowed field out front, always neat, always cropped. She enters her meadow. That's how she thinks of it. She thinks, my meadow. Her day is gray, though warm enough for short sleeves, a shirtwaist dress, suitable for sitting in the meadow. A few minutes she can linger, then back to the work that waits inside the house. Today, before sitting, without thinking, she turns. God puts a finger inside her rib cage and drops her to the ungiving earth. No words, but revelation. This is it. Field, house, barn, sheds. Only this much color and no more. Beyond the fixed horizon, another meadow. Someone will never leave. Her world, your world, mine. This world is ever edges, pressing on whatever aches in us.
Mm-hmm. That just
Thank you. The next poem, the title is Cannelé de Bordeaux. That's the name of a French pastry. And this particular poem is a response to a piece of art that my husband did, and I think Tad's going to put it up for you. There it is, of a sunflower. The poem is called Cannelé de Bordeaux. Open the gate out front. Pause. Consider stucco and stone. Consider cow's tongues and agave. Approach the front door. Step inside and surrender to the sunflower that is no longer a sunflower. Conde crayon on textured black paper. A whirl of brittle sepals bearing nothing where petals dimmed and fell. Calyx of claws on a hardened stalk rising up out of darkness. Where does light come from when there is no light? Just white on black, white that lights a dead receptacle from within. Illusion of light. Apply one color that is all colors against a second color that is none. Preposterous as the fresh-baked pastries awaiting you in the kitchen, crisped in butter and beeswax, dark shells breaking open to ravenous light. Thanks for putting up that piece of art.
Sure, and thanks God for sending that to us. That will be featured in issue 4 next to that poem.
I'm excited that both will be in there. The next one is a very short poem. It's called Beside the Blood Red Table. And this was a response to a Vogue cover, the October 15th, 1918 issue, a giclée print by the French artist Georges Lepape. And the only thing I would say before I read it is it would be a good idea to remember that in October 1918, we were 4 years into a hideous war in Europe. Here's the poem. Her brooch is darkest onyx, molten liquid cooled, condensed, weighted with grief. Her own, her mother's mother's grief, absorbed into the stone's dark heart. Its weight bending her as she leans, her back an exquisite curve, offering fruit to the child who feels this weight already. Head bent, silent, waiting for the men who will not return. 20 million dead, and still the child will have an apple. Okay, those are the three that will be, and I'm very excited that Peauxdunque Review took all three. I do have time. A fourth one, this is new, and I'm reading it because it's about art. It's called Self-Portrait as Fanboy, and the art here is not a painting or paintings. It is me reacting to movies and two famous people who were in them. Self-Portrait as Fanboy. 1. When magazines passed their sell-by date, I pulled them off the rack. Her face was on so many covers. Movie Screen, Movie Mirror, Movie Life, Esquire, and Cosmopolitan. Photoplay. Her imperious brows, eyes lined dark as charcoal, shadows in opaque blue-gray, like Wedgwood with an iridescent glaze. $1 Million Queen, Staphylococcus aureus pulsing in her blood. Pneumonia took her to the edge. A scalpel saved her, tracheal incision, tube inserted to carry breath. She hovered at the edge of gone, but she came back. As cameras rolled again, the Egyptian temptress snared Caesar and his general. Off camera, she wrecked 2 marriages. For years, she loved and warred with her Mark Antony. 2. My mother cried, Aunt Madeline cried, at the last time I saw Paris. I was 6, stupefied by the beauty of a woman's face in close-up, the violet in the iris of the eyes that found me in the dark. I remember snow, a locked door, Van Johnson passed out drunk inside, while Elizabeth Taylor stood outside, knocking. My mother cried, Aunt Madeline cried. I promised myself, one day I'll be grown, one day I will marry impossible beauty. 3. She was an illness of the eyes, this woman made up, bejeweled as Cleopatra. Color-saturated photograph and photograph and photograph while I was 13 and then 14, sorting magazines, bagging groceries at the ice house, ringing up beer and chew for a working cowboy who sometimes slouched the aisles. When I looked at Elizabeth Taylor, my eyes said beauty. When I looked at the cowboy, my body said, I want. 4. Years passed before I immersed myself in 4 hours of popcorn-scented dark, 4 hours of ancient history tarted up as spectacle. Memory retrieves a single image from the most expensive movie-making of its time. The great Egyptian queen in close-up, a makeup artist's oversight, the tracheotomy scar on Elizabeth Taylor's beautiful throat. 5. On a balmy May night in 1956, she climbed through the back window of a shattered car, pulled herself over the bloodied seat, and cradled Montgomery Clift's wrecked face in her lap. Elizabeth could see that he was choking. She reached into his throat and removed several broken teeth. Distance and dark and curving canyon roads delayed the ambulance for an hour. As they waited, Los Angeles glittered on below. Her lap was soaked in blood. His face a nightmare. But Monty was breathing. 6. His face was never quite the same. Left side a crude stone rendering of young Monty's easy cowboy insolence riding herd in Red River. After plastic surgery, he was back on the set with Elizabeth, her smile fresh as a ripening peach, his mouth no longer smiling, eyes a testament to pain, voice a record of suffering. Wrecked beauty, beauty nonetheless. Movies before, movies after, I look and look, my throat aches. Last part, 7. Wedgwood shadows with an iridescent glaze. My mother cried, Aunt Madeline cried. Elizabeth Taylor's beautiful throat, Monty's wrecked face in her lap, a stone rendering. When I looked at the cowboy, my body said, I want. That's that one. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you to Peauxdunque Review. When you have a chance, go to the links that they're mentioning. Buy books. We need to keep independent bookstores and independent journals in existence. They need to survive this pandemic. Thanks again, Ted.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much. Our next reader is going to be Sarah Jiang, and I have to say, I mentioned before David started reading, he's somebody who I'd been following, and I knew his writing for a number of years, and so I had my fingers crossed as I trafficked his stuff off to our readers and hoped it made it through, and it did. Sarah's came to me the opposite way, and I like it. I love it when this happens too, where I haven't read the piece yet when I've sent it off to the preliminary readers. I'm not familiar with the work, and yet I see the comments coming in from the preliminary readers, just the oohs and the ahs, and I'm like, oh, I can't wait till this comes back from them so I can take a look at this. And that was Sarah's piece. Everybody uniformly, and this is how it is, of course, with all the work that makes it into these. But I remember particularly the comments on Sarah's were just agog with this piece, and I was so happy when it came back to me to read it and to figure out how best to fit it into issue 4, where to put it, and it's like making a mixtape, right? So Sarah, we're so glad you're in issue 4. We're so glad you're with us tonight, and I hand it over to you.
Thank you, Ted, for publishing my story. I'm very grateful. Yeah, so, and also thank you for this opportunity to share the stage tonight with so many well-established, seasoned writers. So I'm gonna read this nonfiction piece. It's called The Pork Ribs. I'm just gonna read the first few pages. My parents had a butchery business. They started off selling pork meat to villagers and gradually expand their business to wholesale restaurant. In China, every part of the pig was the treasure. Beside the meat, the pig's head, feet, and intestines were dehaired, cleaned, and cooked with spices, then sold to customers. The skin of the pig was cooked to make a traditional dish called skin jelly, or sold to dealers to make leather, and eventually transformed into the leather jacket or shoes people wore. The belly grease was fried to make tallow and sold to manufacturers to make candles and soap. Even the pig's blood was an edible commodity. To coagulate the blood, a handful of salt was stirred into the freshly collected blood in a stainless steel metal basin. Once the blood was coagulated, it was then cut into cubes, poured into hot water, and boiled into blood curds. Of all these parts, the ribs were the most expensive, considering the various delicacies one could make with them. Soy sauce braised the pork ribs, sweet and sour pork ribs, and braised the ribs into taro, just to name a few. My favorite part was the tail. I remember its oily texture in my mouth, juicy and tender, rich with collagen and fat. There was always a little muscle attached to the tail bones, which I consider the most delicious lean meat from a pig. My neighbor once asked me, then a 5-year-old, why my skin was so luminous. I confided in her the secret of consuming pigtails. She laughed. The tail has since become my signature, which my parents had relentlessly shared with various people hundreds of times. At 7 a.m., my father had just hacked the full pack of pork ribs into two halves. My mother slid the bigger half into an enormous bag and wrapped the excess plastic around the ribs. She fumbled in the cabinet where we stored the used nylon toad and found a precious red one, into which she shoved the swaddled half pack. Bring this to your class advisor so that she will do you favors, my mother said, pointing to the hot pork ribs in the red bag. I sighed. Reluctance emerged on my 12-year-old face. Don't be a fool. You think being seated in the first row is a coincidence, my mother snapped. I dreaded. How could I manage to drag this bloody half-pack of pork ribs to school and finally hand it to my class advisor, Miss Lin, in front of all my classmates? Why did we always have to bribe others? How could I find the perfect moment for delivery without being spotted by other teachers and classmates? Okay, fine, I caved in, mumbled with downcast eyes. We're all human beings, Lu. It's called 礼尚往来. Reciprocity. You return a favor with a favor, my mother patiently explained, citing the Confucian doctrine. I wanted to ask her why she couldn't deliver it herself, but I knew better than to ask. She would reprimand me for my selfishness and claim that she had to sell the whole pig by the end of the day, while the meat was still fresh. Any meat left unsold will be shoved into a freezer and marked down as old meat. Without further questioning, I fastened the red toad onto the back seat of my bike and paddled to school. On the way to school, I contemplated the lies I could possibly conjure up. As I was mindlessly paddling, a light bulb came on. I remember a relative of my mother who worked in the school cafeteria. If anyone asked, I would say this half pack of pork ribs was for her. When Miss Lin entered the classroom, she smiled at me ardently, as if saying that I had done an excellent job protecting the ribs, which would soon end up in her stomach. My mother called Miss Lin this morning and told her that I would be delivering fresh pork ribs for her. I could envision the phone conversation this morning. Miss Lin, you don't know how grateful we are to you. My daughter reveres and praises you. Her achievements are all attributed to your aftercare. Her father just slaughtered a pig this morning. I will ask her to bring you half pack of pork ribs as a small token of our gratitude. This is an organic pig, no antibiotics and steroid in the feed. My mother would drone on. No, please don't let her bring anything. It's my job as a teacher to care for students. For the entire class, I didn't raise my hand to answer questions. I stayed low-key, hoping not to draw attention. I wonder if the benefit of bribing my teacher would outweigh the trouble I went through delivering it, plus the price I had to pay later for the 2 wasted classes. When the bell finally rang, Miss Lin dismissed the class and strolled out of the classroom. I quickly took out the ribs, feeling my heart thumping in my throat. I trotted gingerly behind Miss Lin like a stalker ready for a crime. Once she was out of the teaching building, she turned right and headed to the office building, traversing the spacious plaza where the national flag was flapping in the wind on a pole. The clatter of the metal string hitting the pole resonated with my hastened heartbeats. It was in this plaza that we assembled once a month for an inspiring speech given by the school principal, and watched the flag rising while the national anthem reverberated in our ears. Rise, rise, rise. Those who refuse to be slaves, march on, march on, march on. I turned my head to look at my periphery to make sure none of my classmates were at the scene. As soon as she passed the plaza, I seized the opportunity and took off sprinting while calling out to her. She halted and turned around. Take it back to your mom, Lou, and tell your mom that I thank her for thinking of me. Her porcelain skin slightly creased at the corner of her mouth while she spoke. No, please take it. I can't take it back. My mom will be mad at me, I said, almost begging her to take it back. No, please bring it back. The ribs were thrusted back and forth between us. Chinese etiquette required one to refuse the offering a few times before receiving it, so not to appear too greedy. At last, I made a decisive and forceful shove. She took it this time. There was an acute and blissful relief in my chest. It stemmed from a reduced gravity from the earth, I thought. Please thank your mother for me. I will buy, Miss Lin. She smiled and waved me goodbye, exposing her perfect teeth. Before I bribed Miss Lin, I knew for certain that her smiling at me meant she was fond of me, but I wasn't sure how to interpret her smile afterward. My mother was right that teachers were humans first. Filling up their stomach took precedent of the noble endeavors, such as teaching. I beamed at her, pushing up my glasses, looking innocent and studious. I didn't know what would ensue with the bribery. If I knew, I would have never done it. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Sarah. We're so excited to be publishing the whole piece in issue 4. So thank you so much. Our next reader comes to us in one of my favorite ways that writers come to us, and that's through the Words and Music writing competition. Kaitlin Murphy-Knudsen actually was in issue 2. It was, I had to look.
Right.
Because she was an honorable mention in the poetry category in the 2018 competition. And we don't automatically publish all of our honorable mentions, but when it's a benefit of being the review that that administers the competition. When we see something we like coming through that way, we are just very lucky to get to publish it. The piece she's going to read from tonight, however, was in issue 3. It's a fiction, a story called Rescue, which was an honorable mention in the 2019 Words and Music Writing Competition. And Kaitlin, we're just so excited that you're one of our repeat contributors, because we just love your work. So I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you. I think before I start with this, I thought I'd start from the beginning. But before I start, I just wanted to say thank you to you, Tad, and also to all the editors at the Peauxdunque Review. I know this, especially this year with everything going on. It's just you're very supportive and kind to your authors. I can hear it in your emails. It's very much appreciated. So thank you, and to Megan and Candace, who are all doing all of this behind the scenes stuff that I see on my screen. And I know they're holding up the whole foundation of this entire festival. So just want to thank them for being so warm and welcoming to all of us authors. And to the authors who just read, I'm in a little bit of a trance. It's sort of hard to read because I just got so into those. David's poem, I'm going to have to look back at. Christina's World is right on my wall right here. And I don't think I saw that poem, so I will definitely go back and be looking for that one. So thank you to everyone. So this is a story about an escape and a rescue. So let me read you a story, or at least the beginning of it. So, she drove the freeway with a white-knuckled hold on relief. Her car stacked only with the belongings whose utility weighed more than the anchor of shared memory. Purse, laptop, phone, 2 suitcases, no wedding presents, no matter how useful, clothes the con man hated. Her bright tie-dye dress, a yoga tank that turned her torso into a yin-yang symbol. Pre-marriage clothes that had all gone underground in a bottom drawer, waiting him out. A pillow and blanket for rest stops, though the pillow's insides had been pummeled to broken clumps of polyester cotton blend on bad nights spent in the guest room, which was still decorated in the pre-homey, pre-con man collection. A few bottles of water and snacks from the pantry she needed for the trip. On the day he'd broken into her email, she'd ended her dependence on the cloud for everything but music. Pink and Christina Aguilera had gotten her to the border, and when she'd passed from the Panhandle into Alabama, she'd found respite in the sun, giving its last sigh over a glade that stretched to the Gulf beyond the loblolly pines. Hold on to the relief, she coached herself. She knew from past attempts that it would fade with the foaming questions of what came next, with the costly doubts about how exactly she was supposed to reconstruct a disassembled self in an entirely different life. It was like those programs that took a movie and let someone fakely cut themselves into it, never quite looking real in the film. And so she held on to it, the relief, the thing stronger than she was, that sucked her down into the present, blocking everything from her view but the thin line of road that pulled her toward the horizon like hope. Then she saw the seal. About 50 yards ahead, it moved slowly toward the right of the highway, limping on one side and for flipper. She blinked hard. Her brights were on, and she had a full view of the animal as she passed. Seal? Sea lion? It was bigger than any seal she'd ever seen. Okay, the only one she'd ever seen had been at the zoo as a kid, and anyone would know a seal when they saw one, right? Then, just as it reached the side of the road, she saw a second one, struggling behind the first, hurrying as if chasing it. It was facing her as she approached and raised a flipper in her direction. She looked in the rear view where it waved to the car behind her. It was true that she'd not been the most keen of observers lately, but what? Should she stop? Put herself alone at the side of a highway in the hot purple-black night with 2 injured and scared animals who were bigger than her? She picked up her phone, knowing she was breathless, not caring how she sounded as she spoke to the 911 dispatcher and estimated her location. A seal, you said. You're sure? A pair of them, at least one injured. I think one of them waved at me. They need help. Do you do that? I mean, for seals? They put her on hold for a longer time than she thought was reasonable for an animal to have to wait. Are you driving? Yes. Can you pull over at the next exit? Report exactly where you are? She realized now it was dark. Not suburban ambient world dark, but the snoring pickerel frogs, copperheads at your feet, aimed to kill you dark of the rural wetlands she had camped by as a kid, hid in moonlight. She had pulled off the highway, but hadn't noticed a sign. It was typical of her state of mind these last few weeks. Scattered, unsure as she'd ever been. Yes, she had left, but the energy required for that one right decision had drained every other decision-making resource from her brain and abilities. The local road was empty. No street signs. I'm sorry, I can't. Actually, I have to go. I don't know where I am. Please help the Fields. I think they love each other. I don't know what I mean by that. She hung up the phone and turned down the next road. She thought of the phone call to her friend the week before, the effort to hide her desperation for someone with her head on straight to know, to just tell her what came next. They hadn't spoken for 6 years, ever since she'd dropped off the planet to join the con man on his. Look at you, her friend had said, without a word on her exit from their former friendship. You rescued yourself. Don't forget that. Now, come to my house before you change your mind. She hated the sound of her friend's voice, wanted to extract the familiar tenderness, the confidence a voice print can carry to a friend and make it land inevitable on her hesitating well. The road turned to dirt and mud before her, and after a few minutes, or maybe an hour, she faced a wood fence that had rotted open, allowing her to pass. Where cypress trees overcame the road, she bumped around them, catching glimpses of water in their forests beyond. She breathed the ripe steam of summer wetlands that snaked through the vents of her car. She stopped, closed her eyes, and pressed her thumbs into the sockets to think. Lost, too narrow to go all around the waves of defeat. She started up again and felt the tires catch in the mud. Revved it forward, but slid to the right, downward. Had it been a road at all? She downshifted and tried to regain control. She didn't realize she'd shifted into neutral until it was too late. Seconds of slide on a black meadow of water gaped below her, surrounded by oaks, cypress, and switchgrass. A calm appeared while she watched herself descend. She unlatched her seatbelt and tried to unlock the sticky door lock she'd reasoned wasn't worth fixing on such an old car, switching at the last second to the window, which lowered while she waited as if a mere onlooker before a calamity. She hit the water, coasting sideways for a moment before the car began to sink. She crawled out the window and swam upward against the efforts of everything she owned to suck her back down. Only after she'd spotted the rock and begun to swim toward it did she feel an urgent need to go back and salvage what she could. That old Civic had been a safer home in the last week than her previous home had been in the last 5 years. Except for its few quirks she'd learned to live with, it was dependable. Plus, it had everything in it. Her phone still might work. She turned back. At that moment, she remembered her mother, and the thought of the thick bodies of cottonmouths with their standing-up irises, Naegleria fowleri brain-eating amoeba, and the glow of round eyes she saw now, between her and the shore about 20 yards away, changed her mind. 2 gators, one in the water and one resting on the slope of land across the pond. She swam hard, climbed onto the rock, her eyes adjusting to the night. Her elbows scraped raw against its edges. She found the gators again, their eyes still in moonlight. Unconcerned or waiting? Her father would have known what to do. He'd grown up swimming in Florida's estuaries and lakes, though as he told it, developers and northern transplants had taken that Florida away, denuding God's fertile country of its mangroves, gopher tortoises, redhead ducks, and every other kind of gulf and wetland beauty of his childhood, replacing it with manufactured beachfront properties, strip malls, and northern politics. In the stories he told in an air-conditioned kitchen pressed on all sides by the endless Florida heat, his nostalgia for old Florida was bested only by his laments for the woman her mother, a northern transplant herself, used to date. Their debates about it suggesting mysteries of motherhood and marriage she'd never find the vocabulary to question. Your mother used to love this old swamp as much as I do, he said to her before one of their camping trips, none of which her mother would participate in now, and would spend days punishing him afterward for the risks he took with their daughter. We used to kayak between snapping turtles and alligators while branches of southern oak stiffed into the shore like a dance. Your mother could set up this tent smoother than a knife through butter while surrounded by red ants, snakes of every ilk, and those thieving monkeys imported by the damn fools who liked money more than the land that kept their damn souls in their bodies. He would elbow or playfully jab her mother. Question. Come with us, please? Her mother was not persuaded. When you become a parent, the world becomes a place to be afraid of, while people command that you teach your child how not to be afraid. It's an impossible task. If you're like your father, this will make sense. If you're like me, maybe you'll figure it out better than I can. On one family trip of the kind her mother had consented to, the white beaches of Marco Island, they had ridden bikes beside waterfront condos and rental properties swollen with winter escapees from elsewhere. After a half hour of an ecological history lesson full of northern bandits robbing the Gulf bottom for their seawalls and marauding the coast of tortoise habitats and mangrove forests that cleaned the air and protected everybody from hurricanes God's way, her mother stopped her bike. Ben, can we enjoy a vacation on the beach, please? Vacation with condos as fat as the tourists for blocking a view? I don't see how. People are more important than trees and turtles. Our family, for example. Your daughter. Can you think about that for a minute? Right, there's your problem, Melby. Sometimes I swear you know better than the rest of them, but then I tell myself I know you better. Sometimes her mother answered silently. She disagreed. Maybe she had picked up some southern manners after all. Until her death, her mother had attempted to impart her knowledge of every way Florida would try to kill her. And until his death, her father had attempted the opposite, to show her how to love it, to be as inside of it as every other life form that sustained it. Sitting on the rock staring down two alligators, she wondered which of her parents had won. She'd never surrendered to the rhythms of place as her father could. And what would her mother say if she saw her daughter now? Despite all her knowledge of what to be afraid of, she had not seen what was coming. She had met and married a wounded animal, governed by a pain and fear that rendered him dangerous as the alligator slipping from the bank into the water, 20 yards away. Maybe she would make no sense to either of her parents. It was only a hard coagulation of lessons and traits they would not recognize as theirs. Because for all their disagreements, at least they both felt what they felt. She drifted then, somewhere between the two of them, a stillness on the slick rock in the nocturnal buzz of Alabama swampland. She did not feel fear, only a flatness she couldn't explain. It was an empty, orphan way to feel. So, if you read the rest of the story and buy the journal, then you can find out what happens with the seals and the alligators and a couple other characters that come up. So that's issue 3. Thank you for listening, everybody, and for being here.
Thank you, Kaitlin. Thank you for writing that and sharing it, submitting it to the competition so that we could read it and publish it, because it's just a fantastic story.
Thank you. Thank you. I look forward to hearing the rest of everybody else. Have a good night.
Yeah, you too. So I'm going to do a thing real quick before I bring on our next reader, and that is to acknowledge there are so many people who work on this journal, and I appreciate all their work. I kind of get to sort of sit back, like I say, and traffic manage all this. But in addition to Larry Wormington, who's our editor-in-chief, we have fantastic genre editors. You've heard now all 3 of our genres: poetry, creative nonfiction, and fiction. Our poetry editor is Nordette Adams, herself a wonderful poet and with just a fantastic understanding of what makes good poetry. Our fiction editor, and also our music editor, Emily Schote. And I think one of the things that makes, hopefully that makes Peauxdunque Review work well is that our editors are fantastic editors, but they're also fantastic practitioners of this. And Emily is, I think, example number 1 of this. She is an amazing fiction writer herself. Our CNF editor is April Blevins-Pajic, and again, just wonderful at writing the genre of CNF, but also just a fantastic editorial eye. Jed Marston is our assistant poetry editor, and Maurice Carlos Ruffin, who rounds out our editorial review board. Just fantastic. And I'm going to run through this really quick, but we can't do any of this. The genre editors can't do it. I can't manage and edit this thing. Larry can't run the whole thing without an incredible cast of readers who take the first crack at everything that comes in. So I'm just going to run through the list really fast, I promise. Kayla Andrews, Lana Austin, Ann Babson, Amanda Boyden, Amy Connor, Lee Downing, Drew Jordan, Susan Kagan, Stephanie Knapp, Andrew Coy, Denise Moore, Cassie Prine, Christopher Romaguera, Ben Saxton, Christy Schaefer, Emily Strong, and Susan Bennett Valley. none of this happens without them doing the hard work at the beginning of the process. So thanks to all of them. Our next reader is Jackson Musker. He is a poet and a delightful human being. We met him at AWP in San Antonio before the world ended back in March, and had a great conversation with him, and as we did with many people, but he's one of the ones who heeded us when we said, send us your stuff. And when he did, we're so happy that he did.
I obeyed.
Jackson's poetry is going to show up in issue 4, coming out in here in a couple of weeks. So I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Hey, thank you so much. This is doubly exciting for me because it's my first published work in any outlet is in Peauxdunque. So thank you all for taking a chance on me. And thanks to all those readers who you just mentioned who probably looked at my stuff and were like, oh my gosh, I'm hearing something here. So thank you. The invisible people in the background are my favorite people. And this is my first like public reading of stuff too, which is funny that it's over this wonderful streaming service and that various, like family members and significant others are watching this from far and wide. So thank you all for setting this up. I love New Orleans. Yeah, and I just, it's nice to be sort of a virtual part of the literary community, even though I'm here in Los Angeles, kind of admiring what you all are doing from far away. So I have 3 poems in this issue. I used to write poetry when I was in college, and then I kind of segued away from it, and I've worked for years in public radio and podcasting. So kind of like audio stuff is my first love and kind of what I've made my career out of. So I love the sound of words, and I like playing with them, but for so long I did that primarily in audio and not on the page. And then I had some life changes a few years ago where it sort of brought me back to poetry and to writing. And among them was, I came out as queer. I sort of like rethought my own perspective as a creative person. And like, maybe I want to be more directly creative instead of working as a producer on other projects. So just various things like that resulted in trying to write something that I hadn't before. And the results of those are things that I'm going to be reading today. So the first one, I was debating whether to do the paper or the full technology. I'm going to look at the full technology on the computer and see if that goes okay. This one is called Thermodynamics. And here we go. Energy is neither created nor destroyed, they say. The heat must come from somewhere. In my apartment, it comes from the wall. An old gas furnace with a wily flame that's gone out again. I bend over to tend to it and to impress my shivering, almost boyfriend with the faintest show of primal skills, of proper cave keeping. But all at once, I'm beside my grandfather, the former firemaker of the family. He, eternal bearer of a pocket knife, shaver of prime kindling, parer of persimmons, liberator of tightly packaged electronics. He'd kneel with his faithful tool at the brick hearth, a word that a rental apartment can't quite contain, and build a pile from the ground up of last week's LA Times, kindling thin as ribbon strings, and logs from out back. Everything methodical, straight, and tall. And sometimes he'd let me start it. In the movie version, he loved the movies. He'd summon me over with a son, make a real performance of it. But really, the matchbox in his hands was as matter of fact as a sandwich. Our exchange winkless, quiet, made for the cutting room floor. Then after a while, he'd creak upright again like a fallen tree reversing time. I strike out with the first 3 matches at the furnace, and he looks on from somewhere, and he looks on from the couch. And then the fourth takes, and before we know it, we build a pile from the ground up of shed shirts and inside-out jeans, lumpy and lopsided beside the coffee table. In fits and starts, our bodies rub and spark, and we collapse into each other. It's too hot, we say, and we laugh. And we wonder aloud why I lit the furnace. So that's the first one, where it's sort of about the newness of a relationship with my now boyfriend, who's tuning in right now, and how I was trying to grapple with so many things in that period, but among them were the excitement and also the sort of nostalgia tinged with regret that I had for waiting a very long time to come out and to sort of be my authentic self. So that was all wrapped up in my relationship with my with my grandfather, which was wonderful, and sort of built around these like very domestic moments, like building a fire. The next poem is called Movers and Shakers, and it's a little bit of a weird one. It's a sonnet, and I love formal poetry and kind of messing with it a little bit. So this sonnet is actually about, instead of about the outpouring of love, it's about this sort of containment and absence of love. So I guess that makes it's sort of like an anti-sonnet, but in the form of a sonnet. Once again, it's Movers and Shakers, and here we go. Sorry, let me drink water. At 17, my most outstanding skill was sitting still. I'd side-eye guys who itched, who jockeyed fast and elevator pitched. They're up and down, they're in and out. The thrill of chasing tail, of clamoring at gates, was lost on me. I'd be the last to pack a plane or lay my test atop the stack, cross-checked, layered with lead, and worth the wait. Our econ teacher said, "Gents, time is money," demanded that we not waste our short supply. In his day, he stocked shelves at night, so high with cans, then spent his cash on dates with honeys. Now how I shake, spill out in every aisle. I came out late, I'll pay the price a while. And so the last line is maybe the most literal of them, but it is directly inspired by my Catholic all-guys school experience with a very funny and unfiltered econ teacher named Mr. Durfee, who would talk about his own high school job and how he made a living working night shifts and took all the girls out on the town. And it was so anti my own experience in high school that the contrast seemed like there was something in there. And yeah, that's sort of in a more down moment. That's kind of how I considered the transition, was just as wasted opportunity, as like, I waited too long. I now have these, like unrequited feelings that, looking back, that I can't express now. This next one is a much lighter one, although it's about aging and getting older. I was looking at the mirror one day and saw that I had, much like my mom does, very nice crow's feet when I would smile. And I had just come back from the beach, and so they were especially prominent with my bright red Irish face and my white crow's feet kind of sticking out on the side. And so I thought that it reminded me of a bunch of different things, but I kind of played around with it, and it turned into this poem called Crow's Feet. Here we go. It's post-sunburn we notice them most, the dull streaks. Say, brushing our teeth after a careless beach day. Light claws planted, cheek into a crimson field. Blue sky or no, month after month, they only quicken their eerie march, each outgoing wrinkle inching us nearer to the finish, not letting us forget it for a minute. Why can't a finch or parakeet, something minuscule and musical and twee, with tiny taloned feet arranged comparably, take up the baton, assume the mantle? Not this tar-cloaked creature, this croaking totem already linked in cultures half the world over with mortality, and, in social settings, with wholesale murder. Then again, maybe crow's feet, often so hard to swallow, are the bird's sweet revenge, payback for the armies of stuffed shirts and straw men we've been stacking for centuries against them. Perhaps we laughed a bit too eagerly at our deception, and so invited this cheery little dance of death beside our temples. And that's Crow's Feet. It's about death at the end. Like, I thought it was happier until I reread it. But no. I'm sorry, yeah, a downer of an evening. But no, it was funny just thinking about the sort of transition from like youth to all these lines happening in places, especially when you're sunburned and come back from the beach. And I just like the idea of crows kind of like, for once, we yell at them, we just like shout at them through the window, and like they've got our number with these little constant reminders of how we cannot escape the tides of time. So
thank you so much, Jackson, for not just reading those, but talking to us about them. I'm transported actually now back to San Antonio in early March, because that was one of the more delightful conversations I had that entire
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
So thank you so much. And I know we are not going to be the only people who publish your work, but I'm glad we're the first.
Oh, thank you for saying that. No, I love this.
So now our next reader, another reader who's going to be in issue 4, Hamza Rehman. He is one of our fiction writers, and I am just thrilled to death about this story. This is another one, kind of like Sarah's, where I kept seeing the comments bubbling up from the preliminary readers about this wonderful story that was coming through. And then when I got to put my eyes on it, it completely justified every single one of those comments. So Hamza, I send it off to you.
Thank you so much for having me here. And I just wanted to say that you guys are actually my first publication. So I'm
Wow.
an American, and it's my first publication in the United States. So I'm very, very honored to be a part of Peauxdunque. And I will always remember New Orleans and your magazine. I'm just going to set the timer so that I don't go over time. And I'm going to start from the top. This is a story that I wrote in my MFA, and it was a part of my thesis. And it's actually the first story that I sent out from my thesis for publication. So I'm so glad that it found a home, and I'm so glad it found a home with you. And it's called, the story is called, "And I Thought Islamabad Would Rescue Us from Us." I was reading the newspaper in the exam hall of the university. Proctoring for a statistics paper was a special hell, a jahannam reserved for junior lecturers, especially if you're a woman. The newspaper's pages were unwaxed, and ink stained my fingers as though I had murdered crows. Smug politicians were inaugurating a port in Gwadar, looking like gods in waistcoats and shalwar kameez. On page 2, a village panchayat had sanctioned the rape of a girl as punishment for a crime her brother had committed. On page 7, the color fuchsia was declared the rage in fashion circuits this season. A photograph of a model was showing her blowing kisses on a catwalk in Lahore next to the designer, who was wearing a t-shirt with the words "violent" for violet emblazoned in purple sequins. Rage. The article actually used that word for a color, rage, as if madrasa students were burning the streets for purple-dyed saris and flowing ghararas. I turned back to page 2 so fiercely, I ripped the newspaper through the headline about the village rape. The words panchayat and dishonor and tribal senior stood out. Fuchsia. It's an ugly color, an ugly shade for a shalwar, an ugly shade for a kameez. It could drape our shoulders in the form of a dupatta. It isn't a color found in khaki villages. The color of dust would never find its way to page 7's fashion news. Fuchsia was also the color of my separation. When I saw the photograph of the Bengali woman from Dhaka my former husband lived with, I thought she was beautiful. Perhaps it was the cold skies of Toronto in the photograph, or perhaps it was Abdullah's smile, but they looked devastating. She made him feel like himself. Some wives have that effect, you know. They make you into yourself. I saw it in the photograph, the way she rested a hand on his shoulder. His shoulder came into existence. Her sari was beautiful and elegantly draped. You know what else her sari told me? I know this knowing that fabric does not lie. Her pallu's folds were innocent. The pallu was innocent, which is to say, Abdullah hadn't told her about me, told her about his past. Her sari was the deepest shade of violet innocence. I wanted to protect her from him. I checked my watch, and it was 20 to 12. Students were beginning to crawl into the exam hall. I used to like colors. I liked fashion. I liked paisleys and flowers and effusion and mismatched fabrics. I even liked outdated kimkhab. I'm not in mourning. I'm just less silly. My colors are muted. No, not muted. Responsible? Can colors be responsible? I like neatness and precision. I stack student papers on my desk like kapde ki dukaan fabrics. I like my furniture perpendicular to the walls. I do all this in a culture of cupolas and domes and jarokas and chajjas and arches and frescoes and poetry and Sufism and skies drenched with Allah, the divine marked in the curve of Arabic. All this in a culture with villages that observed no logic or straight lines. We were 15 minutes into the exam. I swear the student looked like Abdullah. I noticed the way he stretched his arms over his broad neck. His tanned skin was like a Pathan farmer's arms, thick with muscle. He was cutting maize with a large scythe. He was lifting brickloads on his head on Islamabad's under-construction houses. It felt foul and intense. I tried to distract myself from its stink. See, Mrs. Tabassum, I don't hate men. Last year, the controller of examinations told me none of the boys in my survey literature course had earned an A. Do you hate your male students, Miss Alia? She asked me. Did she think Abdullah had something to do with this? It was an arranged marriage, and we did the nikah over the phone, long distance. I was young, and I was naive, and I was excited to meet my Desi husband living in Canada. He had other plans when I landed at the airport. You travel 8,000 miles to the west from a place like Pakistan. You hear the landing gear open, and it's the sound of becoming Muslim on the asphalt. A strange loudness at immigration that lasts hours. I crossed oceans to become his, an Airbus A300 soaring south from Greenland into what would become the absence of me. An Airbus A300 reducing altitude into his me. We rarely are ours, and I was never mine in Toronto till I had to. Mrs. Tabassum certainly despises me, though. Perhaps it's because I come from an Urdu-speaking family. We are Muhajirs from India. I suppose her demeanor isn't helped by the circumstances of her life. Did I tell you she lost her only child decades ago? He got pneumonia on a cold Islamabad evening. Little Jojo. She calls him Jojo, and she keeps a photograph on her desk next to the stationery. He's wiping his small hands on Mickey Mouse pants. She ceased to be a mother because Jojo arrived early to a place we're all headed. I don't even know what Jojo's real name is. I don't think anyone does. But I don't hate men. This student was sitting at the back. He looked like Abdullah without the events of Abdullah in my life. You know what I mean? At once him and sufficiently not him. A shade darker than Abdullah that kept me from losing my mind with resentment. I walked down the aisle, pacing slowly. I had populated my life with Abdullah's face. I had populated my hurt with him, given cheekbones and a mole to the devastation. So when I saw the student, he shocked me in the way his face didn't trigger a flood of memories. He simply wasn't my past sitting in a metal chair, bent over an answer book. He was the universe warning me I had no claim to write off the shape of people. He was beautiful. No mole. Eyes were almond. Muscle. I returned to the lectern and scrolled through names in the exam roster. Sadaqat Khan, Javeri Hanif, Aisha Moinuddin on Shaukat, and I reached his. Registration 6004457, Jahanzeb Ansari, Computer Sciences. There was a photograph next to it. Jahanzeb Ansari, I whispered, and I continued scrolling down names. Sitting next to him was Meher Malik. Of course! They played basketball together. I remember now. I've seen them on the court many times, and had seen the resemblance to Abdullah, just the way I saw him in others, though he hadn't struck me the way he was now. I had seen Meher speaking with Sara Ahmed, the Debate Society president. Perhaps they were seeing each other. I saw them talking at the backside of the university once, where couples went to spoon sometimes. It's never anything serious. They're mostly spitting a samosa and being cute, and yet the idea provokes me. I can't help think some girls being used on my territory. I mean, this isn't rural Punjab. This isn't the dominion of some panchayat or jirga. This certainly isn't his Toronto. Jahanzeb stretched his arms over his neck again. This time his elbows cracked with strength. I remembered Abdullah, our first night, when the bedsheets pleated and curved on his navel. His palms were rough and tender at once, a feeling I could only describe as sincere. Abdullah must have known it was my first time. Well, here's what he didn't know. When he reached inside me, he was reaching into everything. All the years I spent learning the art of being a Desi girl, the non-touch of existing, the formality inside each friendship, each act of modesty I performed, everything. The dupatta I wore when I stepped outside the house, the extra fabric in the suits my tailor stitched for me, the way I sat in a chair, the silence each time I sipped chai with cardamom afloat on the surface. Abdullah reached into my everything. He reached into history, a culture, a religion. So why did he do what he ended up doing to me? Men? Desi men? Maybe. I have an uncle who wears a long beard and keeps his shalwar to the ankles as though he's perpetually ready to pray. We imitate mosques so perfectly, we forgot to become Muslim. I'll stop there.
Yeah. That's, I tell you what, our fiction editor, Emily, I'm not sure if I've ever said this where she could hear me, and she can hear me now. But I've said this sometimes to some of the fiction writers who we've accepted, that I don't know a tougher reader of fiction than Emily. I see pieces come through from the preliminary readers. They've got great, comments. I look at them like, oh, that's pretty good. And I send it to Emily, and she's like, yeah, no, that's just, no, I've seen that, or it's not quite doing it. And you may see she's commented over in the YouTube feed here that she couldn't stop talking about this story when it came in. And
thank you so much. Oh, that means so much to me.
Yeah, it's just wonderful.
Thank you again for having me.
Thank you for sending it to us, and we're so excited to be publishing it. We are down to our last couple of readers in our celebration of Peauxdunque Review 2020. The next person up is a poet who will be in issue 4, Ana Fores Tamayo. Anna sent us her poems in English and in Spanish, and she writes them in both, and is very careful to emphasize that one's not a translation of the other. And reading them and hearing them, I think you will hear that they are equal artistic achievements. But it's not just a matter of writing in English and in Spanish. She also sent us photographs along with them. And I'm not sure if, Anna, you intended for us to take those photographs as submissions in and of themselves, or if they were just supposed to be part of what we looked at as we read your submissions, but we are publishing the photographs as well. And so if I do this right, I'm going to share screen on the photograph that goes with each set of English and Spanish poems as she's reading them. So if you'll tell me which one you're reading first, I'll go ahead and pull that up. We can't hear you. I think you're on mute.
Railroad tracks? Do you hear me now? Okay. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Railroad tracks and Las Vías del Tren.
Okay. Let me pull this up. All right.
Okay. So the first one will be railroad tracks. Words mean nothing, and life is disembodied in the railroad tracks running sleek over the arid desert, soil and sound of metal churning. And the steel brown river screeches dry, its ever-present howling of muddied banks and dirtied cobwebs. On its black graffiti walls, in its maze of iron clubs, mice nest their innocence through the soot and garbage of the railway cars, thrown away by reckless hands, by drunken hands, by never-caring hands that touch, yet godless, they become the filth they wear. The white man never sleeps while bringing death like words, like yesterday, eternity ago, when the life that was snatched away all water, all words. but words mean desiccation, everlasting void. Empty rivers die, and railroad tracks are abandoned, and mice, they scamper when they're cornered, though these cobwebs echo vacant sounds of sin. And now the Spanish version. Las vías del tren. Palabras no significan nada, y la vida permanece tenue en las vías del ferrocarril, andando audaz sobre el árido desierto, suelo y sonido de metal marcha y marcha. Y el río marrón acero chirría seco su aullido, siempre presente entre los bancos embarrados con sus sucias telarañas. En sus paredes de grafiti negro, en su laberinto de rieles de orín, los ratones anidan su inocencia a través del hollín y la basura de los vagones del ferrocarril, tirados por manos imprudentes, por manos borrachas, por manos que nunca se preocupan y que tocan, pero paganas, se convierten en la mugre que conllevan. El hombre blanco nunca duerme, mientras trae muerte como la palabra, como el ayer, ya una eternidad, cuando la vida antigua arrebata toda agua, toda palabra, pero la palabra significa aridez, vacío eterno. Los vacuos ríos mueren, las vías de ferrocarril abandonadas, y ratones arrancan al sentirse acorralados, aunque las telarañas hacen eco, solitarios susurros del pecado. Okay, that was the first set. And now the second one is called The Road. And I would like to dedicate it to a good friend who passed away a few days ago to COVID. His name is Eduardo Banda. He was a great activist and community leader, and he is now gone from us, but he is very much remembered. The road. The road seems endless, caressing the brown land of winter. Cold rain droplets turning to icicles of blue smoke. The division lines of road, white against black, yet seeming the meandering way. Clouds menace the landscape, dark against the horizon, wet against the drenched sky of winter's day. The wheels keep turning about the wild rose tree, which is dry. The birds are soundless, countering the backdrop of torrid rain, hard, unbearable, pelting. Cities come and go, towns trickle small and tedious, gauntlets covering spring and sun peeking through. Yet the pathway figures onward, black, merciless tree limbs, forsaken like crooked witches, bearing antidotes of sin. Why do the browns channel poverty? Why do the green spots turn dry? Why do the flowers not grow in the seeming black of winter? The cows pasture on the meadow, yet grow scant in the dead of winter. A yellow line sputters on the white and black and gray. The haystacks, still a few spotted through the jaundiced land, rise stark against the bleakness of a leaden earth. And we travel on, forward, forward, shedding waste, not departing where the roadway leads, but following endless white on black, interminable, finite of eternity. And now El Camino. And as you said it very nicely, it's an interpretation, not a translation, because translation is never poetry. El camino se hace interminable, acariciando la tierra quemada de invierno. Las gotas frías de la lluvia se convierten en témpanos de humo azul. Las líneas de división en la carretera, blanco contra negro, imitan a un sendero serpenteante. Nubes amenazan el paisaje, oscuras contra el crudo horizonte, húmedas frente a un cielo empapado del invierno. Las ruedas rotan por el rosal silvestre que permanece seco. Los pájaros se encuentran silenciosos, afrontando el telón de una lluvia sofocante, atontamiento duro e insoportable. Las ciudades comienzan y terminan, los pueblos fluyen, pequeños y tediosos, simulando guantes cubriendo la primavera con el sol que espía su punto máximo. Sin embargo, el camino sigue adelante con brazos de árboles despiadados, abandonados, imitando malvadas brujas con sus antídotos de culpa. ¿Por qué es que el color mestizo simboliza la pobreza? ¿Por qué las tierras verdes se vuelven secas de una vez? ¿Por qué dicen que las flores no crecen en el aparente negro del invierno? Las vacas picotean el pasto del prado. Sin embargo, crecen escasas en pleno invierno. Una línea pálida chispea contra el blanco, negro y gris. Los almiares, aún algunos salpicando la tierra amarillenta, resurgen contra la desolación de los campos ya mortíferos. Y seguimos adelante, avanzando, arrojando desperdicios, no siguiendo el camino de la carretera, sino buscando el infinito blanco sobre el negro, interminable límite de la eternidad. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. It was such a joy to see your work come through to us, and just to see the possibilities of what we could add to the community of writers in the Peauxdunque Review. We actually lead off issue 4 with Las Vías del Tren, and so we start with the Spanish, and I'm so happy that we can do that. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. It's very humbling, and I'm very honored. Thank you.
Well, we're honored to have your work. So our last reader for tonight is Michael Quess Moore. He is an educator and a writer par excellence, right? He's here in New Orleans. And his work is featured in issue 3, which originally was supposed to come out in March of this year, and or at the end of March, beginning of April. And of course, things got a little crazy in the world, and our printer needed to push things back. And in the meantime, as that happened, the world exploded in an entirely different way. We'd already seen, obviously, the murders of Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, and then George Floyd. And the world responded, and we knew the Peauxdunque Review needed to respond too. So our publishing schedule had been pushed back, and it was probably a fortunate thing, because then this happened in the world, and we could really just we tore out the guts of issue 3 and created new guts. And part of that was going to Quess and asking if we could have some of his words to speak to the moment, and that's what he'll be reading from tonight. So Quess, thank you so much for being part of issue 3. Thank you so much for anchoring tonight. I hand it over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I feel like I should turn on this light back here. Y'all give me like a hot tick to do that. It's not the best lighting. All right. Yeah. So thank you for having me close out. Honored to share the space with all of the amazing writers we heard tonight. This poem is not going to take me 10 minutes, so if it's okay, I had some other poems I wanted to read. Cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm going to definitely get to this poem, which started as a Facebook status, and I guess you liked it, and it got shared. And thank y'all for taking some of my little, random free writes and turning it into something that can add to the conversation out there to expand consciousness around a plethora of things, but certainly around racial injustice and inequity in this moment. I'm going to start off with something that has nothing to do with any of the above, because I don't always just anchor myself in, the grit and the grime of the struggle. Sometimes, a little lighter than that. So this is a little low key type of ode to New Orleans. It's called Indigestion. It's that moment in New Orleans traffic when the stockpile cars form blood clots in the city streets, when the whole damn small town is a congested body overrun with clogged arteries, when you become the self-loathing mouth of this body, cursing every moment that led you to a moment so stifled, looking for meaning in this madness, for a metaphor like a doctor's diagnosis, or perhaps the otoscope to shed light on a situation. When you remember how much fun it is stuffing your face with more than you can handle in the first place, how much comfort you've always found in this town's food, no matter how bad the indigestion. I had another poem I wrote. This is like a COVIDian poem, if that's going to be a genre one day. I hope I can find it. I was over here scrabbling trying to find it, about the opposite. That was all about rush hour traffic. But of course, our streets are not nearly as populated nowadays. I had a poem about it. Can't find it. If I get back to it, I will share it with y'all. But this one is about a different kind of travel. I went to Colombia, Cartagena last April 2019, and went jet skiing for maybe the second or third time, but beautiful experience. And it's always a beautiful experience going to these, what I like to call Afro-colonial cities. They say New Orleans is more the top of the Caribbean than it is the bottom of the South. When I go to certain places like Colombia or Bahia in Brazil, I often get to witness that, experience that, and see the beauty of the African diaspora that's been scattered due to the transatlantic slave trade, of course, all across these western shores. This is actually a shirt I got in Bahia of an African deity named Shango, who I am a son of in the Yoruba tradition, Omo Shango. But this is a poem that I wrote for Colombia. It's called As the Black Boy Jet Skis. It's the lilt and lift of the machine, small reaches in flight, scratching at the impossible. It's the waves beneath, buoying the black boy towards heights and speeds unknown that make fear a small fish, swallowed by the ocean of wonder before him. It's the venture along Caribbean coasts, like he's some sort of pirate, but in this tale, no one's here to kill the natives and loot their treasure trove. In this version, Black Boy is the gold, stolen back by his own hands and returned home. And home be any land rich with the glow of folk-colored fertile soil to soft clay screaming, "Bien aquí, amigo," at the sight of him. It's the turn of the machine, swaying with his body like a mechanical horse of the ocean, a sea horse, bending to his whims, like them big blue flying creatures in Avatar. It's the Black Boy swaying to the ocean's waves in kind. Return to Mami Wata like prodigal son, yielding to the mighty hand of her ebb, buoyed to power by the gentle push of her flow. It's wondering where that myth about black folk and water even ever came from. And ain't we been here before all that? Digress. It's remembering and forgetting. All right. This next poem is a little bit closer to where people might be used to me writing around racial issues. I went to Vermont a couple of summers ago and had unfortunately an interaction that wasn't too pleasant. It kind of speaks for itself. And then another old white man is another old white man. Black boy reaches, open palms to the blue, sky behind his eyes. From it dangles a body of flame, feet kicking beneath pupils, hovering just above his mouth, a Vermont landscape, syllables snipped and kempt as suburban lawns on, tamed tongues pasture, passions pasteurized to be made palatable for, pomp and circumstance in house of the privileged, stilted on spine and femur of, black grandma's grandma's grandma, galvanized the bones when, skinless pink-faced man say from New Orleans, huh? You live in a dangerous neighborhood? Black boy all eager, good sport in Hunger Games, not knowing he prays, say, it's New Orleans, where neighborhood ain't dangerous. Laughter from the skinless pink-faced man, laughter from the ghost pale college kids tending the bar, as if to suggest, pour me another. Skinless pink-faced man say, you teaching a poor and shitty school? When you gonna do something about that poor and shitty school, huh? More pale laughter spills, their cup runneth over. Black boy lips sealed like casket, feet flail behind his eyes, embers rain down, tongue, all smoke and ash. All right, one more poem. We're gonna get to this poem that you all published, for which I am greatly appreciative. This poem is called The Sound of Weapons Being Formed. I wrote this a few years ago, probably after the first uprising of BLM. And it kept asking why all our poems sounded the same, why all our words wrapped themselves around race, gender, oppression, revolution, like there was nothing else. Why the threads of our tropes wove themselves into ropes, knotted nooses fastened round the swollen necks of guilty men. Why our voices clang from microphones like heavy metal against rock. The heat in our throats, the smoldering cinder in a welder's lab. Metaphors melding worlds of pain unknown to them. So our anger be alloy of both black and poor, poor and queer, queer and woman, woman and trans, all things spewed hot and rich from the earth born unrich and unwhite. We be lava's offspring, condensed by time and struggle into things rock hard and impenetrable, broken by struggle and melted by time into all things fluid, malleable, welded by words into weapons too hard for you to fuck with. So now we something like tools of battle, similarly slicing through midair like swords built for this. It's funny, all that whiteness knows of war. Seems like they know the sound of weapons being formed, of distant armies gathering, of infantries collecting, like karmic debt at your front door. All right, this next one is called, well, this was the Facebook status that turned into a published poem. Thank you very much, Peauxdunque, for giving it a home. On the flames in my bones and how they got there. Here's the part where we pull out our war stories and tales of survival. Say, I too have known the crawl space beneath safety and the wanting ground, heaving hungry from below. The part where I tell you of me and my brother and my best friend at 17, in my mom's caravan, riding up Canal Street in teenage black boy joy, before it even had that name, till 4 unmarked cars surround us like wanted revolutionaries, like political dissidents, or preyed upon stars, and our names ain't even Salvador or JFK or Tupac, so we can't make heads or tails out of why we looking down the barrel of a Glock 9. As one white man says, get the fuck out of the car. And the other barrage of white faces formerly suited for battle, spotted with just one not-so-fly boy in their putrid buttermilk, descend on our young frame, shove us to the ground in cuffs as they step on our backs like we the street itself. And once the identification of the usual suspect reveals itself as mistaken, they release us back to our lives and tell us we're lucky it wasn't worse. Here's the part where I remember my mother in my passenger seat, after the fat white man in Sheriff Blues struts away from my car like he just finished a good steak, his shoulders belching the arrogant fog of a man who just consumed slain meat. And after the 20-minute stop off the interstate, Moms understands every morsel of rage ever coated my skin since 13 when my daddy died. And my girlfriend in my passenger seat on Basin Street, her frame heaving like barely escaped prey when an overzealous white man in uniform exits his face I'm hovering over her, having just yanked her door open, shoulders cased in bulletproof, steely blue-eyed joy cased in flinch just right so I can attack just so, as he stares at me, telling me how this checkpoint is all for our good, to keep folks safe from some nearby danger. But there are too many stories at this point, and none of them matter, others than the way they dissolve prematurely like fossils rushed into fuel to fire my today, my tomorrow, and our forever war on this planet where we hurry the mending of old wounds in preparation for the inevitable ones salivating to replace them. My scars are hungry mouths carved into my left arm, my right fist, my fractured psyche. They all say patriarchy's bastard son and white supremacy's dark shadow. They say capital and the belief therein schizophrenic clapback. They all say privatized property turned human fights back, closes an angry door and bars entry forever, opens windows only for a glimpse at light, a release of the flames, marinating in marrow.
Damn.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You're doing the work and you're inspiring the work from other people. So thank you. I'm so glad that we could rebuild issue 3 around that piece.
Honored to share with y'all. Thank y'all for giving it a home. Like I said, I hope it, goes forward and furthers the conversation and the actions.
That's the goal. That's the goal. Absolutely. All right. Well, I got no words I can say after that. Other than that's the end of our night. I know Megan, I think might come on and say a couple words about what's going on with the conference moving forward this weekend. I know we're building up to the big focus on Sunday, a tribute to Tom Dent, and I think this is a great start on the path to that. So.
Yeah, what time is that? I want to check out. I met Tom Dent when I was 17 on the Civil Rights Magic Bus Tour when I first got introduced to all this kind of stuff. So, activist work in New Orleans. So I definitely want to check that out.
Megan, you're mute.
Still mute, Megan. Looks like she disappeared. Maybe if I duck out, it will make more space for her to come in. I don't know. Maybe.
I don't know. She'll come back in. Well, I can tell you some things about the Tom Dent programming on Sunday. Oh, wait, there's Megan back.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Okay, I had to leave and come back because apparently it's like turning it off and turning it back on, which is like my troubleshooting move. So I'm glad it worked. All right, so I'll tell you all about Sunday. We have a whole day of Dent planned. So we're going to start off in the vein of Tom Dent with 4 Howard University graduates talking about Black intellectualism as resistance.
Nice.
And then we're going to move into a workshop with Sky Jackson. She's been working with these poets for a few months now to do a workshop inspired by Tom Dent's poetry. After that, we have No Dream Deferred Theater Company doing a reading of Ritual Murder, which is Tom Dent's one-act play, which is as timely today as it was 50 years ago. So we're really excited about that. And then we're going to close it out with Remembering Tom Dent. We're actually really fortunate. Tom Dent's brother, Ben, and Kalamu Yasalam, Dr. Jerry Ward, and Tom Dent's niece, Lindsay Dent, are going to come and talk about Tom Dent, the man. So that's how we'll close out our festival this year. We've got amazing panels tomorrow. Can I just say how full my heart is after this Peauxdunque reading? I mean, Tad and I have been partners since One Book, One New Orleans took this over a few years ago. And one of our common goals has been to really create space where all voices are welcomed and validated and valued. And I feel like that goal was really realized with this reading. So thank you so much for your curation of this event, Peauxdunque Review and Tad and Larry. I mean, my heart's so full. So we are starting out tomorrow with Publishing 101. It's a workshop. If you are trying to publish a book and you have no idea where to start, Antoinette D'Alteris will teach you how to go from your idea to the page, to the printed page, and find yourself readers. It'll be really great. We've also got the modern memoir with memoirist Sarah Broom and Robert Fiesler, who will be moderating that panel, Teresa Stovall, Morris Ardoin, Beth Ann Fenley. And we're culminating tomorrow night. We're so excited with this reading, Poets, Presidents, and Pandemics, a reading for these times. It's our late night lit session. Last year, Quess, you were part of the late night lit's Poets Respond to Gentrification. So we've got another poetry reading this year as our late night lit. Once again, late night lit is curated by Kelly Harris DeBerry. And we are so excited. We've got Jane Spoken Word, Charisma Price, Lupe Mendez, Justin Rogers, and then Dr. Jerry Ward is going to come introduce our feature reader for that evening, 2017 Pulitzer Prize winner Taimba Jess. So we're really, really, really stoked. Everybody come out. The beautiful thing about Words and Music this year, you guys, is it is accessible to the public on a donation basis. So you can watch on Facebook and YouTube for free. You can give $1, you can give $1,000. God bless you if you give $1,000. Whatever you can give this year, because COVID has hit our wallets, we will appreciate. You can do that by going to Words and Music NOLA on PayPal. So if you PayPal Words and Music NOLA at gmail.com, yes, there it is. Thank you, Candace. You can also text WAM20, WAM20 to 44321. You can also, on the comment section of both Facebook and YouTube, we have a click to give link. You can just click that. And these are workable when we're not live, right? So if at 2 o'clock in the morning, you're catching this on your YouTube feed and you say, this was really great at 2 o'clock in the morning, you can still click that link and it will work for you. That's the beauty of the virtual festival, right? Is you can be a part of the giving at any time. All right. On that happy note, y'all, it has been an 11-hour day, I think. So don't forget to visit our virtual bookstore hosted by Tubby and Coos to buy the Peauxdunque Review and most of the books that we have featured here today on day 1. Day 2, day 3, day 4. We're going to be rolling strong for the next few days, and we'll see you all back here at 9 a.m. sharp tomorrow. Thank you guys so much. Bye.
Thank you, Megan. Thanks, Quess. Bye.
Thanks, y'all. Have a good night.